Did you know muscle cars existed before we even had a name for them? Long before GTOs and Mustangs ruled the streets, the 1950s quietly planted the seeds of America's obsession with V8 power, wild acceleration, and bold styling. These weren't called muscle cars yet, but they had all the right ingredients: high displacement engines, serious torque, and a whole lot of attitude. From experimental fuel injection systems to early Hemis and the first 300 horsepower monsters, these 12 forgotten legends helped define what a muscle car could be. Stick around. You might just discover your grandpa's old ride was way cooler than you thought. Number 12. 1949 Oldsmobile Rocket 88. Let's start this list with a car that didn't just define a new era, it practically invented it. The 1949 Oldsmobile Rocket 88 is widely regarded by automotive historians as the first true muscle car, and for good reason. At a time when post-war America was just getting back on the road, Oldsmobile made a bold move. They took their smaller, lighter Series 76 body and dropped in the brand new 303 cubic inch Rocket V8, an overhead valve OHV engine that was leagues ahead of the old flathead still powering most other cars. That motor pushed out 135 horsepower and 263 foot-pounds of torque, which for 1949 was borderline outrageous. To put it in perspective, the Ford V8 of the same year made around 100 horsepower. The Rocket 88 wasn't just quicker off the line, it blew past the competition. But the Rocket 88 wasn't just fast on paper, it proved itself on the track too. In its very first year, it dominated NASCAR and early stock car racing circuits, winning 8 out of 10 races in the 1950 NASCAR season. Drivers loved its power-to-weight ratio, and it quickly became the favorite among bootleggers, racers, and teenagers with a lead foot. Styling-wise, it had that sleek, fast-back look that screamed speed. Add in flashy chrome trim, two-tone paint jobs, and a name like Rocket, and you had a recipe for icon status. This car wasn't about luxury, it was about go, and it ignited America's craving for power, performance, and punch. All the things that would define the muscle car era in the decades to come. No GT badges, no racing stripes, just a lightweight body, a big V8, and a name that perfectly captured the post-war fascination with speed, flight, and rockets. The Rocket 88 didn't just arrive with a bang, it launched a movement. Number 11. 1955 Chrysler C300. Enter the Chrysler C300, a car that took the idea of performance and dressed it in a tuxedo. While Oldsmobile's Rocket 88 was the scrappy pioneer, Chrysler came in with the muscle of a prizefighter and the class of a ballroom dancer. The C300 was America's first 300 horsepower production car thanks to its 331 cubic inch Bair power Hemi V8, a dual quad car beast that borrowed heavily from Chrysler's racing experience. This wasn't some hopped up coupe for drag racing. This was a personal luxury car, long, low, and heavy. Yet it could sprint to 60 miles per hour in under 9 seconds, which was blistering for the era. It was even called America's most powerful car in 1955. And here's the kicker. It dominated NASCAR too. The C300 won 37 major stock car races in 1955 alone, setting the tone for what would become the legendary Chrysler Letter Car series. Compared to the Rocket 88, the C300 wasn't just about accessibility, it was about prestige. Think of it as the muscle car you could take to a black tie event, and then win a street race on the way home. This car showed America that performance didn't have to look brash. It could be bold, elegant, and absolutely brutal under the hood. But if the C300 was the gentleman brawler of the 50s, the next car on our list took a different approach. Put a hot rod heart into a mid-sized body and see what happens when a luxury brand decides to misbehave. Number 10. 1957 Buick Century. If the Chrysler C300 was the muscle car in a suit, The 1957 Buick Century was the street-smart bruiser wearing cufflinks and a leather jacket. By the late 50s, Buick had a reputation for comfort and class, but someone at the factory clearly got the memo: make it fast. And so they did. The Century name wasn't just a nod to luxury, it was a hint at what this car could do. Century meant 100 miles per hour, and yes, it could hit that mark with ease. Here's how. Buick took the full-sized 322 cubic inch nailhead V8 from their Roadmaster, an engine known for its fat torque curve, and crammed it into the shorter, lighter, special body. The result? A power-to-weight combo that made the Century one of the quickest American cars of its day. We're talking 255 horsepower, with a torque-heavy delivery that launched it off the line like few sedans could. Compared to the Chrysler C300, the Century wasn't quite as refined or as powerful on paper, but it didn't need to be. It was raw, responsive, and more accessible. It appealed to the kind of buyer who wanted Cadillac comfort, but didn't want to be late to the party. And let's not ignore the styling. Buick wasn't shy about chrome, and the 1957 Century had plenty of it, along with a low-slung stance, wraparound windshield, and flashy two-tone options that turned heads. In a way, the Century was the spiritual bridge between the post-war rocket rides like the Olds 88 and the soon-to-arrive pony cars of the 60s. It looked proper but had punch. It whispered elegance and shouted speed. But as Buick was proving you could have both style and substance, another American automaker, smaller, scrappier, and determined to stay in the fight, was about to unleash a car that punched way above its weight class. Number 9. 1957 Studebaker Golden Hawk. While the big boys of Detroit were battling it out with size and swagger, Studebaker, a smaller independent automaker of South Bend, Indiana, was about to throw a serious punch with one of the boldest cars of the decade, the 1956 Golden Hawk. Think of it like this. If the Buick Century was the guy in the sharp suit with a hidden switchblade, the Golden Hawk was the underdog who walked into the ring with nothing to lose and a whole lot of horsepower to prove it. Studebaker didn't have deep pockets, but they had guts, and they had Packard's 352 cubic inch V8. That engine cranked out a massive 275 horsepower, which was huge for a car of its size. In fact, the Golden Hawk had a better power-to-weight ratio than the Corvette of the same year. Let that sink in. This luxury coupe could outrun a V8 Corvette in 1956. And it didn't just move fast, it looked fast. The Golden Hawk had tail fins that looked like chrome jet wings, a wide-mouthed grille that oozed confidence, and two-tone paint jobs that screamed, "Drive me fast" or "Don't drive me at all." It wasn't subtle, but then again, why should it be? Compared to the Buick Century, the Golden Hawk was even more radical, more daring in both design and engineering. It was proof that performance didn't have to come from the biggest company, it just had to come from the boldest ideas. Studebaker's Golden Hawk didn't last long in the grand scheme. By the early 60s, the company was struggling, but in its prime, it was one of the fastest, most unique American cars you could buy. It was a luxury rocket wrapped in rebellious style. And while Studebaker was catching people off guard with unexpected speed, over at DeSoto, things were about to get even wilder, with a Hemi-powered cruiser that had 1 horsepower for every cubic inch of engine. Number 8. 1957 DeSoto Adventurer. The name alone, Adventurer, tells you this car wasn't built for people who liked to play it safe. In 1957, DeSoto unleashed a machine that didn't just cruise the streets, it prowled them. Big, wide, low, and dripping in chrome, the Adventurer looked like it was built for a drive-in movie date, followed by a midnight drag race. This wasn't some watered-down grocery getter. Under the hood was a fire-breathing V8 with twin 4-barrel carbs. It pumped out so much power that DeSoto made sure everyone knew 1 horsepower for every cubic inch. That kind of bragging rights was rare back then, and even now, it's the stuff of legend. The Adventurer wasn't subtle either. It came in bold colors with gold accents, massive tail fins, and the kind of presence that made you feel like a 1950s rock star just by sitting behind the wheel. It was limited edition, high performance, and high style, all in one. Only a few thousand were made, and fewer still survived the decades. But for the lucky ones who got to own one, the Adventurer was more than just a car. It was a statement. Number 7. 1955 Packard Caribbean. The Packard Caribbean was the kind of car that pulled up and made Cadillacs nervous. It looked like it belonged at a country club, but don't let the white walls and chrome fool you. This thing had serious bite. With a massive V8 under the hood and dual carbs feeding it power, the Caribbean had no problem lighting up a straightaway while keeping things silky smooth on the ride. It had self-leveling suspension, two-tone paint that looked straight out of a fashion magazine, and just enough attitude to remind you that Packard wasn't ready to fade quietly into history. In the mid-50s, luxury was everywhere, but performance? That was rare. The Caribbean gave you both. It was stylish, sophisticated, and secretly savage. Number 6. 1959 Mercury Super Marauder. Just the name, Super Marauder, sounds like something that should come with a warning label. In 1958, Mercury wasn't playing games. They rolled out a car that shattered expectations and claimed the title of the first American production car to crack 400 horsepower. And this wasn't some special dealer tune or race-only version. Nope, this came straight off the assembly line. The 430 cubic inch V8 under the hood was fed by triple carbs and sounded like thunder on wheels. It was big, brash, and unapologetically powerful, like Mercury dared the world to keep up. From the outside, it had that classic late 50s swagger, long lines, heavy chrome, and fins that could slice the air. But under all that flash was a monster waiting to be unleashed. The Super Marauder wasn't just fast, it was ferocious. We're officially past the halfway mark, and if you thought only the big-name brands brought in the heat in the 50s, think again. Number 5. 1957 Hudson Hornet V8. By now, you've seen the flash of the Packard Caribbean and felt the raw fury of the Mercury Super Marauder. But what about the car with heart? The kind that comes from a long history of punching above its weight. Enter the 1957 Hudson Hornet V8. Most people remember the fabulous Hudson Hornet for tearing up NASCAR tracks in the early 50s with its low-slung straight six. But by 1957, Hudson was part of AMC and needed a serious power update. The answer? A 327 cubic inch AMC V8 cranking out up to 255 horsepower. Sure, it didn't have the 400 horsepower like the Super Marauder or self-leveling suspension like the Caribbean, but it had attitude and a legacy. It was leaner, a little meaner, and still had that aerodynamic design that racers loved years before fins and flash took over. The 57 Hornet didn't scream for attention. It didn't have gold trim or triple carbs. What it had was grit. It was the underdog's comeback attempt, a car that said, "I'm still in this fight," even as Hudson's days were numbered. It may not have won the horsepower war, but it still showed up swinging. Number 4. 1957 Dodge D500. This is the one that didn't need a spotlight. It earned respect the moment it showed up. The Dodge D500 was Mopar's first real jab at building a street-legal bruiser. No gimmicks, no flashy nameplates, just a beefed-up, no-nonsense sedan stuffed with a 325 Hemi V8, solid lifters, and a rumbling dual exhaust note that warned you long before it arrived. This wasn't your uncle's retirement ride. It was built for drivers who didn't care about frills. They wanted speed and maybe a little chaos. It didn't get the hype of the Mercury Super Marauder or the polish of the Packard Caribbean, but the D500 laid the groundwork for everything Mopar would become. Before Roadrunners and Super Bs were even a sketch on a napkin, this was the factory hot rod that said, "Let's go." A little forgotten today? Maybe, but back then, it was Dodge's declaration, "We're done being quiet." Number 3. 1956 Lincoln Continental Mark II with optional hot-rodded V8. You don't usually think of tuxedos when you talk muscle, but the Lincoln Continental Mark II made elegance feel dangerous. This wasn't some stripped-down racer. It was a hand-built luxury coupe, priced higher than a Rolls-Royce at the time, but under that smooth, sculpted hood sat a 368 cubic inch V8 with enough low-end torque to move this heavyweight with surprising urgency. It wasn't built for burnouts or back roads, it was built to glide. But that didn't stop hot rodders from getting their hands on one and waking it up. And let's be real, when a car is cool enough for Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra, it doesn't need stripes or spoilers. It just needs presence. And the Mark II had it in spades. Not a muscle car? Maybe not by specs, but park one next to just about anything else from the 50s, and it still steals the show. Number 2, 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air with Fuelie 283. If you had to pick one car to represent 1950s cool, the 1957 Chevy Bel Air would be the one. This wasn't just a car, it was a cultural icon, a movie star in its own right. Chrome-laden, tail-finned, and dripping in charisma, the Bel Air became the poster child for America's love affair with the open road. It showed up at drive-ins, sock hops, and of course, on the silver screen. But the version that really packed a punch, that was the one with fuel injection. The mythical Fuelie 283. 1 horsepower per cubic inch, 283 horses in 1957. That was sci-fi level stuff in an era when most cars were still gasping for breath with carburetors. Under the hood sat Rochester mechanical fuel injection, turning the Bel Air from a prom queen into a street fighter. No need for mods or wrenching in your buddy's garage. This baby came fast from the factory. All you had to do was drop it into drive and hold on. This car wasn't just about style, it was substance, and it hit American pop culture like a thunderbolt. In American graffiti, you could practically feel the same soul behind every burnout and drag race. In 2-lane blacktop, it was the canvas for counterculture rebellion, and in every 50s and early 60s themed movie or series, from Grease to Happy Days, the Bel Air was there, gleaming under neon lights, ready to roll. It became more than transportation, it was a symbol of youth, freedom, rebellion, and raw horsepower. When the Bel Air cruised into frame, you didn't need dialogue. It was the message. And here's the thing. The Bel Air Fuelie didn't just make Chevy cool, it set the stage for what came next. That spark ignited the Camaro. It helped birth the Corvette's performance legacy. It laid the path for the SS badge and every muscle car fantasy that followed. The 57 Bel Air might have had curves and chrome, but with the Fuelie under the hood, it had fangs, and it was ready for its close-up. Number 1, 1958 Pontiac Bonavville with Tri-Power V8. And here we are, the final car on our list, and we're ending with a name so iconic, so dripping with street cred, that it became a legend in its own right, the Pontiac Bonavville. Now, you've seen a lot on this list, V8 bruisers from Dodge, chrome-clad beasts like the Mercury Super Marauder, and even Hollywood favorites like the 57 Bel Air Fuelie. But the 1958 Bonavville brought it all together. Raw performance, bold looks, and a serious swagger that set the tone for Pontiac's muscle-bound future. Let's talk power. The 1958 Bonavville came standard with a 370 cubic inch V8, but the real story was the Tri-Power setup. 3 two-barrel carburetors working together to deliver a healthy 300 to 330 horsepower, depending on configuration. That kind of output wasn't just impressive, it was up there with the fastest American cars you could buy at the time. The Bonavville was big, heavy, luxurious, and still, thanks to that Tri-Power system, it could move with the urgency of a car half its size. It ran the quarter mile in the high 15-second range, which, for 1958, was flying for a full-size production car weighing nearly 4,300 pounds. And it wasn't just what was under the hood that turned heads. The 58 Bonavville was a rolling art piece. It had dual headlamps, jet-inspired tail fins, and one of the wildest grills of the era. Inside, it was just as plush. Bucket seats, futuristic instrumentation, and chrome that stretched from one end of the dash to the other. This wasn't a stripped-down racer. It was power wrapped in full-blown luxury. Compared to the Fuelie Bel Air, the Bonavville was less about tight handling and more about pure straight-line dominance. Where the Bel Air brought early fuel injection tech, the Bonavville responded with brute force, carbureted power, and more cubic inches. It was Pontiac saying, "You want a Corvette that can fit your family? We got you." The Bonavville name would go on to define Pontiac's performance image well into the 60s and 70s, eventually giving rise to legends like the GTO and the Firebird. But this is where it started, right here in 1958, with 3 carbs, bold paint, and enough torque to leave skid marks from Detroit to Daytona. The 1958 Bonavville wasn't just the end of this list. It was the beginning of a revolution. These cars might not have had stripes or burnout contests named after them, but make no mistake, they were muscle cars in everything but name. Big V8s, bold styling, a need for speed. They laid the groundwork for what was coming in the 1960s and beyond, and today, they're the unsung heroes of American performance history. Which of these pre-muscle monsters surprised you the most? Did we miss any of your favorites? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear your picks. And if you love discovering the hidden roots of car culture, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. We've got more automotive time travel coming your way. Because sometimes, the best muscle cars are the ones that didn't even know they were muscle cars yet.